I'm so tired of scalpers that I've gotten to the point where I'm just going to assume that anything bad that happened on planet Earth is 100% the fault of scalpers. Global warming, just blame it on scalpers. You got a flat tire? Well, I don't know how they necessarily are at fault, but still, blame the scalpers. It's okay. In today's video, we're actually going to take a look at some listings that are being propagated by scalpers, or people that buy these action figures and flip them. Now, I should clarify, not all of these are necessarily quote unquote scalpers. There may be some people that just had these figures. They either had extra figures or it's their own personal figure, but they're deciding to move on from it and they're just pricing it at market value. We kind of see that pretty consistently. I think collectors run into that situation from time to time. Sometimes you'll have like a particular wave or a figure that you planned on displaying or like opening up, but things happened and then you eventually just decided to get rid of it and you didn't want to sell it at retail. You just sell it at whatever the market value is. So regardless of what situation these particular collectors or resellers are going through, it's interesting to kind of go back and look at some of these figures and what they're selling for, because I don't know, it's for funsies, I guess, just to see what the market is on some of these figures. I personally don't own any of these, but you know, if you guys happen to run across them, you may be able to run into them at retail or at your local comic shop and they're still close to retail or they're still affordable. It's a good idea to pick these up. Let's get straight into today's video. Actually, the first figure that I ran across was the Page Punchers Cheetah action figure. This is the Platinum Chase variant. I have no idea what is going on with this figure. I remember it kind of popping up on my radar, but I never made a legitimate video where I talked about her. What's crazy is she's like a legitimate OG character. She's from like the 1940s. She made her first appearance in like Wonder Woman issue number 6. She's from like way back in the day, like the golden age of comic books. So it's crazy that we haven't actually received her in action figure form. The styling, the body mold, and the paint job is definitely very reminiscent of like some of her first appearances. So it's really cool to see her in action figure form. This is from the Page Punchers line. So if you guys are interested in actually picking up the Chase variant, you'll be paying close to about, with taxes and shipping included, you'll be paying about like almost $100, about mid 90s to about 100. That's absolutely insane. If I'm not mistaken, she was supposed to be a Walmart exclusive, or was a Walmart exclusive, and then eventually maybe became widely available. I don't exactly recall, but going through some listings, it does appear that it was a Walmart exclusive. Now, the regular version is much more affordable. You're still paying a little bit of a markup, but you're paying closer to like about $40 to $50. The Chase one seems to have like considerably more value. Moving on, I did also run across the Batgirl from that Fighting the Frozen action figure wave. Personally, I don't really remember this wave that well, because back then I wasn't purchasing a lot of Mcfarlane collectibles, and I don't think I was uploading content as consistently to the channel, so I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I did run across it at like my local Walmart and Target, and they looked cool. They were part of the Page Punchers line. They included a comic book. Now, what's interesting is, from my understanding, that particular comic book storyline is exclusive to Mcfarlane collectibles. So just keep in mind, sometimes if these spike, or if there's, you know, less of them in circulation, because obviously a lot of kids like to pick these up, or collectors that don't really care about comic books will probably just throw it in a bin somewhere and they won't take care of them. So long term, if you have one of these in like really good mint condition, they could be worth some money, just throwing it out there. But yeah, the comic book storyline is actually exclusive to this particular action figure wave, so that's interesting. It's not something that I knew at the time of me doing the research, but I read a little bit about it. Pretty cool 2023 original comic book storyline for this wave. Now, for some reason, the Chase version of Batgirl is extremely expensive. If you guys are looking to purchase this one, it's kind of on the same level as Cheetah. There might be some outliers here and there, but for the most part, you'll be looking to pay about $90 to $100 with taxes and shipping and everything included. There was, I think, like a Mr. Freeze in that wave, a Batman, and a Robin as well. I didn't check to see if any of those Chase variants were worth any money, but the original ones, they're kind of a little bit over retail. You can find most of them for about $30 to $35. But as I mentioned previously, I think the comic books might have some value in the foreseeable future, but a lot of these Chase variants way back in the day were a little bit more scarce than they are now. McFarlane kind of went away from doing chase variants, so now if you're interested in having like a variant, it's just a store exclusive. It's like maybe a Walmart or Target exclusive. But these two are kind of interesting. They caught me completely off guard. They're both female characters, and I'm not too familiar with each one of these figures. I don't even remember actually seeing either one of these in person, so it's just really interesting to see how much value they're already garnering right off the bat. I also ran across that Page Puncher's Aquaman Wave Black Manta action figure, and I'm not talking about the like shading Black Manta version, because there is a Page Puncher's that has the black and white accents all over it, but that's not this figure. This is the original one from, I think, 2022. For some unknown reason, this one also kind of spiked in value. If you're looking to pick it up, you're paying about like low 70s to mid 70s. It's definitely a much more affordable figure compared to our first couple of examples, but this is intriguing as well. I've said this before. I actually picked up the Aquaman 2 Black Manta figure, and even though I know it's not comic book accurate, I like the design of it, I like the aesthetics, I like the paint job, and I think it's as close as you can get to a comic book version of Black Manta without it actually being a comic book version. If I'm not mistaken, McFarlane has worked on like maybe 3 different Black Mantas that are based on particular comic book series. So in this particular case, if you guys don't want to spend like a ton of money, I think that Black Manta from the Aquaman 2 universe was at like your local Ross's for about $5 to $6. You can always find that alternative. I've seen them online for like maybe $10 to $13. But if you want like a comic book accurate one, you're actually going to have to pay quite a bit of money. This one, same thing. It really caught me off guard. I don't think I ever saw this Black Manta in person. It was around that time frame where I wasn't really doing a lot of action figure hunting, and the channel really wasn't kind of taking off. I wasn't uploading too consistently. So this is another one that kind of just flew under the radar for me. And honestly, I kind of hope that McFarlane, you know, comes back around and gives us a new like end-all Black Manta, maybe like a collector's edition line Black Manta, because I do feel like he is kind of a underappreciated villain. So maybe something with like extra accessories, extra weapons, things of that nature, maybe an unmasked head sculpt. But yeah, if you guys are interested in picking this one up, it's garnering quite a bit of value on the secondary market. Another character that kind of caught me by surprise has to be the Question action figure from the DC Multiverse line. This is technically a chase variant of a Riddler action figure originally, if I'm not mistaken. This thing has reached astronomically high price points. If you're looking to pick it up, you're paying about like $120 to $130 with everything included, which is absolutely insane. Now, I don't feel like this character necessarily has like a huge following per se. I think McFarlane knew exactly what he was doing. He figured if he did a regular line release for the Question character, he didn't feel like he was going to sell very well, and so he decided to make the Question figure a chase variant. Now, obviously, I can't predict the future. I can't tell you exactly if this figure would have sold well or not, but I'm going to go out on a limb and just assume that it probably would have ended up being like some sort of Ross action figure. Like, it would have just completely decimated McFarlane, and so I just think it didn't make sense for him to make a regular mainline release for this character. Although at the same time, there's always going to be people out there trying to take advantage of the situation. A lot of people realize that this was somewhat of a scarce character, and instead of just allowing the collectors that really wanted it to pick it up, they decided to actually try to resell it or make a profit off of the figure. And so the DC collectors that really wanted the Question were left out in the wind. But again, you have to understand this from McFarlane's perspective. It just doesn't make any sense to make like C to D-list characters. I'm sure that, you know, he has had some decent storylines here and there, but not everybody is familiar with the Question. Even though he has definitely been around for quite some time, his first appearance was all the way back in the 60s. And so he's been around, he's been featured on a number of different comic book storylines, but as I mentioned, he is somewhat of an obscure character, so I'm not going to fault McFarlane for not going all out and making him a mainline release. I understand why he makes these chase variants. I know a lot of people want to lose their minds over it or pull their hairs out, but you have to understand it from his perspective. If this figure isn't going to sell out, if it's not going to fly off of store shelves, it just doesn't make sense for him to go out of his way to mass produce a figure that's just going to sit on store shelves, and he's going to potentially take a loss pass on. I also ran across this Dick Grayson DC Multiverse action figure. This is a gold label exclusive, and I can't quite remember exactly where this is originally from. I want to say that it was a Walmart exclusive perhaps, or a Target exclusive. It was exclusive to one particular store, and I can see why people initially did not pick up this figure. From what I remember, it's using the same exact body mold and most of the accessory pieces from the Dark Knight Returns Robin. So it's the same body mold, it's the same articulation scheme, everything is the same. I think they might have switched up just the head sculpt, obviously, and then a few extra hands that the original one did not come with. But at least in my personal opinion, it felt like a dirty move from Mcfarlane. It didn't make any sense that you were reusing that particular body mold, even though, I don't know, I think from afar it makes sense, and if you hadn't seen the Dark Knight Robin body mold, this would be okay. But every time I looked at it, it looked weird. It just didn't seem right to me that Dick Grayson was reusing the female body mold from the Dark Knight Returns Robin. So look, at the end of the day, it's a good solid figure. It doesn't come with the wired cape, because at the time they weren't really using wired capes. I will give Mcfarlane a ton of credit here, because he actually did include a few extra accessories and a few extra hands, and this was still on the DC Multiverse line. If I'm not mistaken, this was being made available at $19.99 or $22.99. It was right before the price hike, if I'm not mistaken, so it might have been the $19.99 price point, which honestly by today's standards is an absolute killer deal, because now the Page Punchers line, the DC Multiverse line, is now being offered at about $25 to $28, depending on where you're picking it up. And it comes with much less accessories. The theatrical edition action figure line and the collector's edition line is now being shopped around at $35 to $38. So this kind of feels like a bargain way back in the day. And I know at the time it didn't seem like it, but I think this figure is actually aging pretty well, aside from the fact that, you know, it didn't come with any soft goods. But eventually, I would actually like to see this character reissued or re-released. I think this figure, along with the collector's edition line Wonder Woman, are two just prime examples of Mcfarlane not capitalizing on the demand for those characters. I think now is a perfect opportunity. He's on his way out, and he already has the body molds. He could just reissue them with either less accessories or different accessories or some extra faceplates or things along those lines. But as I mentioned, I think it would just be an absolute waste if he didn't capitalize on reissuing those figures, especially considering you're now looking at most of the, like the collector's edition line Wonder Woman, I think might have already reached the $200 price point, maybe even over that. And then the Dick Grayson figure is now selling for about $130 to $140. And then next up, I did want to touch a little bit on the Batman Returns action figure wave. As we know, a few months ago, we got a few characters from that particular franchise or from that particular film series. We got a Batman, a Catwoman, the Danny DeVito Penguin, the Commando Penguin, and then we even got the Dougmobile, which I think was a GameStop exclusive. The Batman has been selling pretty consistently for about like low 60s to about mid 60s. Absolutely insane, because we actually have received multiple different versions of Michael Keaton's Batman. Now, granted, not all of them are based on Batman Returns, but still, you would expect that particular Batman to have a little bit less value. But this is a theatrical edition line. People are really gravitating towards this particular little wave, and this is just a prime example of that. The Catwoman has risen to completely new levels. That figure, I think at the moment of this recording, was going for about like $90. So another one that is, I think, the first time in action figure form, or at least modern day action figures. Michelle Pfeiffer absolutely killed it, and clearly people really want this in their displays. The Dougmobile, I think, has reached brand new heights. I've seen sales for as high as like $200 for this particular vehicle. It's understandable, because same thing as almost all of the other figures on this line, it's very difficult to find, I think, a Dougmobile. Have they ever even made a Dougmobile for this particular film? I don't think so. But regardless, this is a 1/10 scale vehicle. A lot of people wanted this. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it came with a Danny DeVito Penguin. I think that one came in like those white pajamas that he likes to wear, the onesie. The Commando Penguin set might be the most expensive figure. I think that one is going for a little bit over $100. So there's definitely a rabid fan base out there that desperately wants these figures. Interestingly enough, this set was very difficult to find in person, and I think they sold out almost immediately online. As is the case usually when there's something that the consumer really wants, Mcfarlane for some unknown reason decides to make it extremely limited. It was very frustrating. Some of these were like GameStop exclusive. I think some of them were Walmart or Target exclusives. So it's very difficult to actually find the entire set. But if you're lucky enough to have found them, you're essentially sitting on a few Benjis. Actually, you could probably pass those on to your children. That's basically their inheritance, because at that point they'll probably be worth like a few $100s each. But it's just kind of interesting, as I said at the beginning of the video, just to kind of go back, look at some of these action figures. Some of them are being scalped. Others, as I mentioned, they're just incredibly scarce, and maybe some collectors want to move on from them. But the Batman, the Batman Returns action figure wave is a prime example of scalpers scalping, because those figures are actually brand new. They're modern. They just came out a few months ago, and people are already trying to flip these for a profit. Although I will say in this particular case, I think Mcfarlane is definitely to blame here. I wouldn't say 100%, but he definitely has some culpability, because why make these incredibly scarce when you know that the fan base is out there, they're rabid, they want these, and unfortunately you didn't produce enough of them. Kind of interesting, kind of mind-boggling, but I just wanted to, as I said, go back, check out some of these figures that have garnered a little bit of value on the secondary marketplace, because I don't know, some of these kind of caught me off guard. I did not expect them to be as expensive as they are, and so it's just kind of interesting to go back and look at them. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of rambling action figure content, just absolute nonsense being spit into a microphone that is action figure related, then you've arrived at the correct spot, because that's what we do on this channel. If you guys want to stay tuned and just watch stuff consistently, we are uploading on a daily basis. Now, I have to say, I do want to go out there and actually do a little bit more hunting. I've been scaling back a little bit over the past week or so. The plans are that eventually I might move the hunts to a completely different channel. Just have one channel that is specifically for hunts, and then have one for action figure reviews, unboxings, news, things of that nature. I'm actually genuinely curious to see what you guys have to say. Let me know down below. Would you guys like to see both separated? That way, you know, you guys aren't getting tricked or bamboozled, as they may say. I haven't used that word in like a decade. But yeah, maybe I separate them. I don't know, make it easier. YouTube, you know, the algorithm, whatever. Anyways, if you guys enjoy this type of content, as I said, stay tuned. We're uploading pretty consistently. Make sure to enjoy the hobby. Pose your action figures, play around with them. And if you have these figures in your collection, you're lucky, okay? You're sitting on, at least in some cases, at least one Benjamin. Are you proud of yourself? You shouldn't be, okay? They're just action figures. Anyways, stay safe out there. Enjoy it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.